This is Love, Life and Lobsters, the design for a live-work model eco-community where the work element focuses on food production. The political context behind this project is that the year is 2046 and following the Brexit referendum, Orkney has left the United Kingdom, which has resulted in the formation of a new government, the Democratic People's Republic of Orkney. Migrants from the British mainland seek safe haven on Orkney, and the new government has called architects to design a self-sufficient model community. The following is my answer to that call. So the site is situated on the west coast of the Orkney mainland in the Bay of Scale. This is the bay, and it's got quite a boggy inland terrain, and it uses these heavy monolithic concrete sea defences to protect Skara Brae, the UNESCO World Heritage Site, located just above the beach. And materiality around the site, it's a fairly battered and bruised environment, showing the scars that come from driving rain and strong winds. And as I mentioned, Skara Brae is located in the bay. Skara Brae is a cluster of preserved Neolithic homes occupied 5,000 years ago, each constructed in the same image. And this ancient model community, as all model communities, relied on cycles and production lines. One such example is that of the lobster. Ancient Skara Braeans would catch the lobster, then transport it to its own bespoke lobster store, and then cook it on the fire. This project takes the lobster's ancient production line and translates it into a design for a modern, self-sufficient community. So, zooming into the bay, we're building on that production line in its modern format. We have the boat, warehouse, restaurant and dwelling. And then the site, we have the bay and its water coming up the beach. Then we have the beach road, the only road. And then we have two unexcavated Neolithic sites further inland. And building the master plan, we do so aligned with the production line. So we begin with the boats to catch the lobsters for people to eat, then a boathouse to dock in with research facilities to enable on-site aquaculture, a pier to connect to the land, then private homes for the crew of these boats to live in, and shared facilities for this collection of people to live as a community. And finally, some shoreline housing to protect the inland development from the rising tides. So, to reiterate, we get boat, warehouse, restaurant and dwelling. And now the proposal. We see the model self-sufficient community positioning itself across the transition between land and sea, operating as a working settlement primarily in the fishing of lobsters with additional crop cultivation and provision for approximately 200 inhabitants across 96 homes. And the proposal is situated along the bay from Skara Brae, and this creating a juxtaposition between ancient and contemporary. So beginning at sea level, the settlement rises from the water before then emerging from the land. And the settlement as a whole traverses land and sea with a consistent language of conversation between driven piles and bulk mass. And the production line is maintained in the programme. And through both form and programme, the architecture is able to respond to the environmental conditions in which it sits. So tidal flooding is mitigated by using sacrificial ground floors and through programmatically assembling technology in warm spaces above the high tide level. So to delve deeper into the project and at a human scale, we should look at a day in the life of one of our residents, and specifically it is a day in the life of Alex and Mickey, a married fisherman and fisherwoman couple of Venezuelan and Italian nationality that left London for Orkney to escape ongoing social hostility. So this is the route of their day, starting in the shoreline housing, going to work in the boathouse, passing by the onshore housing after work, and finally coming together to eat with friends in the communal dining space in the evening. And so first up is waking up in the bedroom of one of those shoreline homes. First, to state what these homes are made of, it's oystercrete, an oyster shell limecrete, not concrete, but a more sustainable concrete equivalent made by substituting the gravel aggregate and cement of a traditional mix for oyster shell. And for all its environmental benefits, oystercrete is a relatively agricultural material. It doesn't have the strength that industry standard concrete can offer, and that impacts on the architecture. So as a result, the shoreline homes use oystercrete's mass to form an unheated plinth cast into the ground, on top of which sits a lightweight cross-laminated timber frame. This construction allows the inside of the home to be sealed quickly in bad weather. Importantly, there are no wet trades within the homes except for the oystercrete of the plinth and the western facade, allowing for future disassembly. Within the CLT floors, a transfer joint is used to provide what I term a yin and yang floor. This allows the home to benefit from both thermal mass exposure and provision of service voids. Next, it's time for breakfast in the home. Designed conceptually as a cliff face, these shoreline homes provide shelter from the Bay of Scales' Arctic winds and driving rain for a cosy and more gentle microclimate to manifest behind them. Facades exposed to the south and west's harsher weather are clad with a cast in situ oystercrete. The remaining north and east facades will reuse the oystercrete formwork as a timber rain screen cladding, as seen here in yellow. So that's how the homes sit and how they're treated externally. Internally, as I say, it's time for breakfast, and now we're located within the top story of one of the shoreline homes. Now, before this project was undertaken, Studio Material Amendment designed and built a mobile studio and made a tour of Scotland, visiting several model communities. The sense of ownership gained from building the mobile studio, along with its temporary nature, has informed the internal environment of not only the shoreline housing, but the entire Love, Life and Lobsters master plan. And the idea is that the non-structural elements, so the service voids from the yin and yang floors, use relatively low-tech materials and fittings so that residents can adapt homes to suit their needs, styles and general preferences over time. In contrast to this largely prefabricated interior, externally the homes are detailed sparingly to tie the built form back to the battered and bruised landscape. Next, it's time to water the plants before work in the communal garden growing space. Much of the shoreline home's eastern facade is open to this space and lined with thermally massive oystercrete. This creates a greenhouse effect within the entrance hall, which can not only be used as somewhere to grow starter plants, but also radiate heat generated from the morning sun throughout the home for the rest of the day. And as the seasons and conditions change, so too does the garden environment. As we go to work in the boathouse, we travel along the pier. The pier uses oystercrete and timber. The combining of these materials requires striking a balance, and for this we consider putlocks, or the weird holes in castle walls where scaffolding once sat. Casting is typically a low-tech process that produces a mass and a void. The void usually created by a timber element. It's what happens in this void that brings the mass to life, whether it be a lobster pot or a bird's nest. And the homes of Scarrow Brae followed this mass and void concept, where the ground served as the mass and inhabitation happened in the void. These voids of timber moments, as I call them, happen throughout the scheme and are seen here as the power tower pierces through the oystercrete switch house. And the buildings along the pier sit in the water as concrete islands sewn together with an X-formwork deck. Once at work, we're landing the lobsters in a boathouse. Using that mass and void concept, the main concrete cube is pierced by two lighter weight stilted wings. These wings each house laboratory-based aquaculture and agriculture. After work, we pass by a friend's house in the onshore housing to borrow a cup of sugar. Constructed above an unexcavated Neolithic site, these apartment-type homes treat the ground as sea, so not to unnecessarily disturb the ruins. This brings a cohesion to the project in using a similar language both offshore and onshore. And finally, it's time to end the day by eating together in the shared dining room. The communal dining spaces continue the language developed throughout the rest of the master plan and provide space to share meals together. We are social creatures, and human interaction and sustenance are basic needs. The shared meal has a power. The power of the shared meal was recognised in ancient Skara Brae. It was recognised in the mobile studio, and it is recognised in the design for the Love, Life and Lobsters model community. I've spoken at length of this project in both present and future tense. The recycling of oyster shells and timber formwork, the harnessing of solar, tidal and wind energy, and the on-site embedded growth of sustenance present elements of an ethos intent on maintaining a good environmental conscience in the midst of the ongoing climate emergency. However, it's important to also consider the project in the eventual past tense. In the ongoing emergency, sea levels are rising and will inevitably rise to a point where inhabitants of this site is no longer viable. As already stated, other than the oystercrete, there are no wet trades involved in the building of this master plan. Therefore, when the time comes, the entire master plan may be disassembled and either recycled or reused elsewhere, leaving behind a ruin of modernity to speak with its ancient counterpart across the bay. And life continues.